Daniel Reed was not expecting anything unusual that morning. He had woken up early, as he always did, enjoying the quiet moments before the world became too loud. The sun was just beginning to rise, spilling soft golden light across the small town he had grown up in. Today he had planned to visit his mother and then run a few errands. Life had been busy lately, and he appreciated these simple, calm mornings. He dressed in jeans and a simple shirt, nothing that would draw attention. Today he wanted to feel like any other person walking down the streets. After visiting his mother, he decided to stop at a convenience store to grab a drink before heading home. The store was small, tucked between a gas station and a row of shops. He parked his car and walked in casually, greeting the cashier with a small nod. Everything seemed ordinary, and he enjoyed the sense of normalcy. Outside, however, 2 local police officers were in their patrol car, parked across the street. They were chatting quietly at first, but when they noticed Daniel, their conversation stopped. Their eyes followed him closely as he moved toward his car. There was a brief moment when their expressions changed, something Daniel could not see but felt in the energy of the air around him. The officers exchanged a glance that spoke more than words could, a silent decision that something about this man caught their attention. Daniel returned to his car, opened the door, and settled in behind the wheel. He felt a little uneasy, though he could not say exactly why. The officers remained parked, their presence unnoticed by most passers-by. They were waiting, watching, calculating. As he started the engine, the sense of tension grew, subtle but unmistakable. It was not fear, but a cautious awareness that sometimes even ordinary days could take unexpected turns. A few blocks later, he noticed the flashing lights in his rearview mirror. Daniel pulled over calmly to the side of the road, keeping his hands on the steering wheel and his posture relaxed. He rolled down his window as the first officer, a tall man with a stern face, approached his car. The second officer followed more slowly, observing carefully as if measuring Daniel's every move. The first officer spoke quickly, his tone sharp. "License and registration." Daniel handed over his documents without hesitation. He remained polite, asking, "Is there a problem, officer?" The officer hesitated, his words caught between a rehearsed excuse and the truth. "Your vehicle matches a description we've been looking for," he said finally. Daniel could tell the statement was weak, and he felt the tension behind the officer's words. Something about this moment did not feel right, and he kept his calm, knowing that patience was the best tool in situations like this. The second officer, slightly shorter and stockier, moved closer. He gave a casual smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Step out of the car, please," he commanded. The words were firm, and the unspoken message was clear. Daniel stayed seated, his hand still on the wheel, his tone even. "May I ask why?" "I am happy to cooperate, but I would like to understand the reason for this stop." The officers exchanged a quick look. One of them muttered something under his breath, and the other ignored it. Daniel felt the eyes on him, the way people sometimes looked when they were unsure of what they were about to do. He knew that this moment was delicate, that any sudden move could escalate the situation unnecessarily. Slowly, Daniel reached into his pocket, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. The taller officer's hand twitched toward his holster, a reflexive motion fueled by assumptions rather than facts. Daniel's calmness seemed to irritate them, their impatience growing. The street around them was quiet now, with a few pedestrians slowing to watch the scene unfold. Daniel's composure remained steady, his voice low and firm. "I want to cooperate fully, but please explain why this is happening." The shorter officer leaned closer, a smirk on his face. "You think you're smart, huh?" he said. "You're making this difficult." Daniel stayed silent for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. He understood that arrogance often masked insecurity, and he could see it clearly in their expressions. They were trying to assert control, but their uncertainty showed in the way they shifted their weight and avoided his gaze. Finally, Daniel spoke again, calm but firm. "I am not looking for trouble. I just want to understand what is happening. I am happy to comply, but there is no reason for aggression here." The tension grew, almost palpable, as the taller officer's hand moved slightly toward his side. Daniel's training had prepared him for far worse situations, yet he recognized that the best tool in this moment was restraint. He kept his body relaxed, his movements slow and deliberate. He was aware of the crowd now, the way people were pausing in their morning routines to watch the encounter. He did not want to escalate the situation, not unnecessarily. A car passed by slowly and a woman on the sidewalk glanced at the scene with curiosity. Daniel noticed her expression but did not react. He knew that appearances could be misleading, that a calm presence often disarmed those who sought confrontation. He stayed focused, his mind clear, his emotions steady. The taller officer finally spoke again, his voice less certain than before. "We just need to make sure everything is fine." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand. I want that as well. Please know that I'm cooperative and mean no harm." The officers continued to search his car without asking for permission. Their movements were hurried, clumsy, betraying the tension that Daniel's calmness had exposed. He watched them carefully, noting every gesture, every sign of hesitation. His mind stayed sharp, analyzing the situation, waiting for the right moment to act if necessary. As they moved around the car, muttering to themselves, Daniel remained composed. He did not shout or argue. He did not make sudden movements. His voice remained calm, his presence steady. He could feel the weight of their assumptions, the unspoken biases that fueled their actions. He understood the complexity of human behavior, the ways fear and prejudice could distort perception. A few more minutes passed, and Daniel spoke again, his voice gentle but firm. "Please remember, I am not a threat. I ask only that you treat this situation fairly, with respect and professionalism." The officers paused, their faces betraying a mix of surprise and frustration. They had not expected such composure, such steady confidence in the face of their assumptions. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken tension, a silent test of character and patience. Daniel took a deep breath, maintaining eye contact, showing no anger, no fear. The street around them seemed to hold its breath as well. The ordinary morning transformed into a quiet stage for a confrontation that had been brewing silently in the minds of those involved. Inside his car, Daniel felt a mixture of emotions. He was aware of the danger, the potential for things to go wrong, but he also felt a sense of resolve. He knew who he was, what he represented, and how to navigate the delicate balance of power and presence. He had faced worse situations, but this one was unique in its subtle tension, its quiet but insidious challenge. The officers moved back slightly, as if reconsidering their approach. Daniel's calmness had created a mirror for their behavior, reflecting the unease and uncertainty they had tried to hide. He continued to speak softly, each word measured, designed to de-escalate rather than provoke. He was fully aware of the stakes, yet he remained human, approachable, relatable, a man standing firm in a moment that could have gone many ways. As the minutes ticked by, the officers finally seemed to waver, their initial certainty giving way to doubt. Daniel's patience and composure had shifted the balance. The ordinary morning, once simple and calm, had revealed deeper truths about assumptions, bias, and human behavior. Daniel sat quietly, a steady presence amidst the tension, waiting for the next moment to reveal itself, prepared to act with clarity and principle. By the time Daniel finished his drink and prepared to leave the scene, the air had changed. There was a new awareness, a quiet understanding that things were not as simple as they seemed. He had not yet revealed the full extent of who he was or what could follow, but his presence had already left an impact. The ordinary day had turned into a lesson in patience, observation, and the quiet strength of standing firm in truth and calmness. Daniel Reed felt the weight of the officer's eyes on him as he remained calm in his car. Even though the street had returned to its quiet rhythm, he could sense the tension growing. The two officers were clearly uncomfortable, yet they were trying to hide it behind authoritative gestures and quick words. He knew that their unease was not just about him, but about the way their assumptions were colliding with reality. The taller officer finally spoke, his voice slightly strained. "Step out of the car now." Daniel nodded slowly, keeping his movements visible and deliberate. He opened the door carefully, making sure his hands stayed in plain sight. As he stepped out, he maintained a calm posture, his face neutral, his eyes steady on theirs. He could feel the crowd of curious onlookers, though most of them kept a safe distance. Some had paused on the sidewalk, watching silently as the situation unfolded. The shorter officer circled to the other side of the car, keeping his stance defensive. His tone was clipped. "Hands on the hood now." Daniel complied without resistance. He rested his hands lightly on the car, fingers spread, and waited. He did not make sudden moves. His heart was steady, and he reminded himself that control over his actions was the key to controlling the situation. The officers, however, seemed uncertain. Their authority felt fragile against his calmness. "Why are you stopping me?" Daniel asked, his voice firm but polite. "I haven't done anything wrong." The taller officer's jaw tightened. "We're just making sure everything is fine. We had a call about a suspicious vehicle in the area. You match the description." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. He had seen enough false stops in his line of work to recognize a weak excuse. "I understand that you have a duty, but I can assure you that I am not involved in anything suspicious," he said evenly. The shorter officer muttered something under his breath and stepped closer, his hand twitching near his belt. "Do you think you're smarter than us?" he asked, almost as if trying to provoke a reaction. Daniel remained calm. He knew that any sudden move could escalate the situation. "I'm not trying to be smart. I'm just asking for fairness," he said. His tone was measured, controlled, and deliberate. He could feel the officer's frustration growing, the tension in the air becoming almost tangible. The taller officer took a deep breath, muttering something to his partner. Daniel noticed the hesitation in their eyes, the way they were re-evaluating the situation. They had expected him to respond with fear or anger, but his calmness unsettled them. They were used to control, but here the control was slipping through their fingers. "Do you have any weapons in the car?" the shorter officer asked, his voice slightly less confident. "No," Daniel replied clearly. "I have nothing illegal. I am happy to cooperate fully, but I ask that you respect the law and my rights." The taller officer's hand hovered over his holster, a reflexive motion, but he did not touch it. Daniel could feel the subtle shift in the balance of power. His calm presence was making them question themselves, making them see their own uncertainty. He was aware of the power of patience and observation, tools he had learned to use over years of experience. Daniel could see the small crowd gathering on the sidewalk. Some whispered quietly, while others simply watched in silence. He could feel the weight of the moment, the mix of fear, curiosity, and anticipation. He reminded himself to stay focused, to not let emotions take control, and to handle the situation with the professionalism that had guided him through far more dangerous encounters. The shorter officer reached into the car without asking, opening the door slightly. Daniel's eyes followed every move. He did not panic, but he observed carefully, noting the way the officer's actions betrayed his uncertainty. Daniel's training told him that this was not just a routine stop. It was a test of character and composure. "Do you have identification?" the shorter officer asked, his voice sharper now. Daniel reached slowly into his pocket, keeping his hands visible. He produced a driver's license first, handing it over without hesitation. "I am happy to show my identification. Please treat this process respectfully." The taller officer glanced at the ID, then back at Daniel. His expression was hard to read, a mix of frustration and confusion. Daniel could feel the officer's discomfort growing with each passing moment. They were struggling to maintain control, and he knew it. "Do you live around here?" the taller officer asked, trying to regain authority. "Yes, I do," Daniel replied calmly. "I was just visiting my mother. I am on my way home." The shorter officer's eyes darted toward the car, then back at Daniel. "Do you have anything illegal in the vehicle?" he asked. "No, nothing at all," Daniel said clearly. "You can see for yourself that there is nothing suspicious here. I am asking for respect and fairness in this encounter." The taller officer took a step back, exhaling slowly. Daniel could see that his authority was faltering. The shorter officer shifted his weight, looking uncertain. Daniel remained still, calm and composed. His presence alone was challenging their assumptions, showing them a side of reality they were not prepared to see. The taller officer muttered something about calling it in, then paused. Daniel could see the hesitation in his eyes. He knew that the officers were realizing that their initial assumptions had been wrong, but pride made it difficult for them to admit it. Daniel's calmness, his refusal to escalate, was forcing them to confront their own actions. Minutes passed in tense silence. Daniel did not move, did not react to the small provocations. His breathing was steady and his focus remained sharp. He observed the way the officers were now hesitant, unsure of the next step. The crowd on the sidewalk was growing slightly, though still respectful, sensing the gravity of the moment. The taller officer finally spoke, his voice quieter. "We're going to check your car." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand your duty, but please do so lawfully and respectfully." As the officers began to inspect the vehicle, Daniel stayed calm, watching carefully. He noted every gesture, every subtle sign of doubt. The situation was tense, but he remained composed. His calmness was a mirror to the officers' inner uncertainty, a quiet reflection that they could not ignore. After a few more moments, Daniel spoke again. "I want to cooperate fully, but I also ask that you recognize the assumptions behind your actions. We can resolve this without conflict." The taller officer paused, his hand on the car, glancing at his partner. Daniel could see the internal struggle in their eyes. They were faced with the reality of their actions, and his calm, measured presence was making them confront it. Finally, the taller officer stepped back slightly, muttering something under his breath. Daniel kept his eyes steady, his posture relaxed. He had not raised his voice, had not made any sudden movements, yet the tension in the air had shifted. The balance of power was subtly changing, and the officers were beginning to realize that their assumptions were flawed. Daniel's patience and composure had begun to influence the moment. The officers' faces showed a mix of frustration, disbelief, and the first hints of self-awareness. He remained calm, human, and relatable, showing that strength was not in aggression but in control, observation, and patience. The street around them, once ordinary and calm, had become a silent witness to a quiet struggle of power, assumptions, and composure. By the time the inspection was finished, Daniel had maintained his calm and collected presence throughout. He had not acted aggressively or defensively, yet his patience had caused the officers to rethink their approach. The situation had grown tense, but his steady demeanor had prevented it from escalating further. Daniel stepped back from the car, hands still visible, and spoke quietly. "Thank you for checking. I hope this will be resolved fairly. I ask that we move forward with understanding and respect." The officers exchanged a brief glance, their expressions unreadable, but Daniel could see that they were processing the encounter. His calm presence had exposed the weaknesses in their assumptions and their actions. The moment had passed, but its impact lingered. A subtle lesson in patience, humanity, and the quiet strength of composure in the face of uncertainty. The officers were clearly tense now. Daniel Reed could feel it in the way they shifted their weight, the slight trembling in their hands as they tried to maintain authority. He remained calm, observing every move, every glance. His breathing was steady, his posture relaxed but alert. He understood that this moment could escalate quickly if handled poorly. The taller officer, who had been trying to maintain control, stepped closer, his voice firmer than before. "Do you have any weapons on you?" he demanded. "No," Daniel replied without hesitation. "I have nothing illegal. I am unarmed. I am asking that this interaction remain professional and respectful." The shorter officer moved closer, his expression hardening. "Step away from the car, now." Daniel complied, moving slowly so his hands were always visible. He kept his movements deliberate, a reflection of the confidence he had built over years of training. He noticed the hesitation in the officers' eyes. They were struggling to maintain the illusion of control, and his calmness made them even more uncertain. "Why are you following me?" Daniel asked quietly, his tone measured. "I am not doing anything wrong. I want to understand why you are treating me this way." The taller officer's jaw tightened. "We are just doing our job," he said, though the words lacked conviction. He shifted his weight, his hand brushing near his holster. Daniel noticed the subtle nervousness in the gesture. Daniel stayed composed. He knew that fear or anger would only escalate the situation. "I respect your duty," he said, "but respect should be mutual. I have done nothing to warrant this treatment." The shorter officer muttered under his breath, his tone sharp. "You think you're smarter than us?" Daniel shook his head slightly, maintaining his calm. "I am not trying to be smarter. I am asking for fairness and professionalism." The taller officer's face flushed slightly. He took a deep breath, muttering something to himself. Daniel could see the internal conflict, the struggle between pride and recognition of their error. He remained steady, a human presence that reflected patience and dignity. Suddenly, the shorter officer stepped forward, placing a hand roughly on Daniel's arm. "Don't move," he commanded. Daniel froze, but his voice remained calm. Please remove your hand. I am not resisting, but I ask that you respect my personal space. The officer's grip tightened briefly, then loosened. Daniel's calm, composed reaction seemed to surprise him. The taller officer's eyes widened slightly, realizing the tension was building in a way they had not anticipated. Daniel took a slow breath, his mind clear. He reached into his pocket, keeping his movements deliberate. The officers watched him closely, their posture tense, their eyes flicking between his hands and his face. Daniel's training had taught him that patience and control often disarmed even the most aggressive individuals. He remained composed, human, and relatable, showing strength without aggression. Finally, Daniel pulled out his FBI badge and held it up. The taller officer's face went pale instantly, the authority he had tried to assert evaporating. The shorter officer froze, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. Daniel's voice was steady but firm. You have just detained and searched a federal agent without cause. I expect an explanation. For a moment, silence filled the air. The street seemed to pause as if holding its breath. The crowd of onlookers had grown slightly, sensing the gravity of the moment. They whispered among themselves, their eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. The taller officer's hand hovered near his face, unsure whether to apologize or defend his actions. The shorter officer's jaw tightened, his previous confidence shattered. Daniel remained calm, letting the reality of the situation sink in. His composure reflected dignity, patience, and authority that came from experience rather than force. I think you understand the seriousness of this situation now, Daniel said quietly. I am asking that we proceed with respect and professionalism. This does not need to escalate further. The taller officer swallowed hard, his eyes flicking to the badge and then back to Daniel. We didn't know, he stammered. Daniel nodded slowly. Assumptions can be dangerous. They can lead to mistakes that affect everyone involved. It's important to recognize them and move forward responsibly. The shorter officer's hands dropped to his sides and he took a step back. His face was pale and the earlier smirk was gone. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, the officers now aware that their actions had been inappropriate. Daniel's calm, patient demeanor had forced them to confront their behavior. Please document this interaction, Daniel continued. I want everything on record. Respect and accountability are crucial. The officers nodded silently. They were no longer speaking with confidence but with an awareness of their mistake. The tension in the air remained, but it had shifted. Daniel's patience and composure had de-escalated the immediate threat while maintaining clarity and authority. A few onlookers murmured quietly, some nodding in recognition of the fairness and control Daniel exhibited. He could feel the weight of observation, the subtle pressure of being watched by both the public and the officers. Yet he remained focused, human, and firm. His calm presence reflected a strength that did not require aggression. The taller officer finally muttered, We need to report this to the chief. Daniel nodded. That is appropriate. Accountability is important in every profession, including law enforcement. The shorter officer's eyes were still wide, his previous arrogance replaced with unease. Daniel could sense the internal struggle within them, a confrontation with their own assumptions and behavior. He stayed calm, showing that strength and dignity often came from patience and self-control, rather than force or intimidation. As the officers began to step back, Daniel maintained his composure. His hands were visible, his posture relaxed, but his presence commanded respect. He had shown them that assumptions could be challenged, authority could be questioned, and yet a person could remain calm, composed, and human throughout the ordeal. The crowd slowly began to disperse, the tension in the air lingering but diminished. Daniel's calm demeanor had not only influenced the officers but also the observers, showing that patience, observation, and dignity could shift the balance of power without aggression. Daniel finally stepped fully away from the car, hands still visible, and spoke quietly. I hope that moving forward, respect and fairness guide every interaction. This encounter could have gone very differently, but we have the opportunity to learn from it. The officers nodded silently, their faces a mixture of relief, embarrassment, and awareness. Daniel's calm, human presence had made them confront their actions without escalating the situation. The lesson was clear. Composure, patience, and respect could disarm even the most aggressive assumptions. Daniel took a slow breath, his focus unwavering. He had navigated the peak of tension, maintained control, and shown that authority could be matched with dignity. The street, once ordinary, had witnessed a confrontation that revealed truths about assumptions, human behavior, and the quiet strength of calm authority. As Daniel walked back to his car, he kept his demeanor relaxed, approachable, and human. The officers watched him carefully, understanding the gravity of the situation. Daniel's presence had shifted the moment, showing that true authority comes not from aggression but from control, observation, and patient dignity. The ordinary morning had transformed into a quiet lesson in power, human behavior, and respect. Within hours of the confrontation, the events began to unfold far beyond the quiet street where Daniel Reed had been stopped. The officers' superiors were already notified, and Daniel's actions had sparked a chain of calls to the local police chief and the FBI's Internal Affairs Department. His professionalism and calm approach meant that everything was being documented carefully, each word and action recorded to ensure clarity and accuracy. The dashcam footage from the patrol car, along with the video recorded by a bystander, captured the officers' initial assumptions, their aggressive approach, and the moment Daniel revealed his FBI badge. It showed his calm, composed demeanor as he de-escalated a tense situation without raising his voice or acting aggressively. Within hours, a copy of the video reached social media, and people began to watch in real time as the ordinary stop had turned into a profound lesson in patience, authority, and respect. Local news stations picked up the story, emphasizing the officer's initial behavior and Daniel's professional response. Many viewers were shocked by the video, noting how quickly the officers' faces changed when they realized the truth. Comments flooded in from people across the country, some expressing outrage at the officer's assumptions and others praising Daniel's calmness and courage. Inside the local police department, the mood was tense. The chief of police watched the footage carefully, his expression unreadable as he analyzed the officer's actions. Both officers had already been suspended pending review, and internal discussions were beginning about the appropriate consequences for their behavior. The chief knew this incident would serve as a pivotal moment for the department, highlighting the importance of training, accountability, and awareness of bias. Meanwhile, Daniel remained composed despite the sudden attention. He did not seek recognition or confrontation. For him, the focus was on ensuring that the situation was handled fairly and that the officers understood the gravity of their actions. He provided detailed statements to Internal Affairs, describing each moment of the encounter and emphasizing the importance of calm, professional conduct in all interactions. The public reaction was significant. Community members gathered to discuss the incident, some expressing frustration with local law enforcement, while others praised the professionalism displayed by Daniel. Conversations about bias, authority, and accountability were sparked across social media platforms in workplaces and in households. Daniel's presence and composure had become a model for how to handle tense situations with dignity and restraint. At the FBI, Daniel's supervisors commended his actions. They recognized that he had handled the situation not only professionally but also humanely, ensuring that no one was harmed and that the incident was documented thoroughly. His colleagues noted how he had turned what could have been a dangerous confrontation into a teaching moment, demonstrating the importance of patience, observation, and respectful communication. The two officers faced a detailed investigation. Each action, each decision, and each word was reviewed carefully. The internal report concluded that they had acted based on assumptions rather than evidence, and that their approach had been unnecessarily aggressive. As a result, disciplinary measures were determined, including bias training, mandatory professional development, and in one case, resignation. Both officers were given an opportunity to reflect on their behavior and learn from the experience. Meanwhile, the community's awareness grew. Local leaders and civic groups held discussions about how similar incidents could be prevented in the future. Workshops on bias, professionalism, and de-escalation techniques were organized. Daniel's encounter became a case study in law enforcement training, showing how patience, calmness, and professionalism could prevent unnecessary conflict and build understanding. Daniel, however, remained grounded. Despite the attention, he continued his work quietly, focusing on his duties without seeking fame. He received letters and messages from strangers who had seen the video, expressing gratitude for his composure and courage. Many wrote about how the encounter had inspired them to handle difficult situations with patience and respect, emphasizing the human qualities that could de-escalate tension without aggression. In interviews, Daniel spoke with humility. "I did what anyone should do in that situation," he said. "It's about staying calm, following the law, and treating others with respect. Everyone deserves fairness regardless of assumptions or appearances." His words resonated with many, highlighting that courage was not always about confrontation, but often about self-control and integrity. As the investigation concluded, lessons were drawn by both law enforcement and the public. Policies were revisited to emphasize accountability and training on implicit bias. The officers involved had a chance to learn from the situation, and the department recognized that change was necessary to prevent similar incidents in the future. For Daniel, the incident became a quiet but important reminder of the impact one person's calm presence could have in a tense situation. He reflected on the encounter, thinking about how assumptions and bias could escalate even ordinary situations. His approach had diffused tension, ensured accountability, and sparked meaningful conversations about fairness, respect, and professionalism. Weeks later, Daniel returned to his regular duties, carrying with him the lessons of that day. He remained committed to his work, quietly influencing those around him through example. The community, though shaken by the incident, had also gained insight into the importance of patience, observation, and respect in everyday interactions. In the end, the officers' faces, once full of confidence and assumptions, had revealed the truth of their actions. The ordinary morning had turned into a moment that taught the town, the officers, and the viewers of the viral video about human behavior, respect, and the power of calm authority. Daniel's story became a quiet beacon of professionalism, showing that true strength often lies in self-control, patience, and integrity.